I'll let you know right. I turned off the doorbell, so I'll let you know right before I let everyone in. I'm going to share the screen with my graphic and the music. All right, is everybody ready? Cool.
Bet.
Start.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Angel City's Paralympian panel, part of 2021 Angel City Summer Series presented by the Hartford. We have come together to discuss a very important topic, the experiences of athletes with intersecting marginalized identities. We have a phenomenal group with us tonight to share their perspectives and experiences. Before we hand it over to our amazing speakers, I'd like to make a few quick announcements. In a few moments, you will be prompted to answer a few questions that will help us better understand who our listeners are. Please respond accordingly to ensure this conversation is as productive as possible. There it is. This panel discussion will be roughly 1 hour with 20 to 25 minutes for a Q&A at the end. Everyone except for our panelists will remain on mute and off video until our Q&A portion of this event. Please save your questions for the end of the session, where you will be able to either write them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you. Finally, I'd like to thank the Hartford, the Foundation for Global Sports Development, and the United States International Council on Disabilities for supporting tonight's powerful event. Now I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Stephanie Wheeler. Stephanie Wheeler is the head of women's wheelchair basketball at the University of Illinois, and she is a Paralympic gold medalist. She's also a World Championship gold medalist and collegiate national champion. She was a member of the gold medal winning women's wheelchair basketball team at both the 2004 and 2008 Paralympic Games, and then went on to become the head coach of the USA women's wheelchair basketball team. Wheeler led the team to gold medals at the 2015 Pan American Games and the 2016 Paralympic Games. As a result of her competitive and coaching success, Wheeler was elected to the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame in 2017 and the National Wheelchair Basketball Association Hall of Fame in 2018. She's also an ambassador coach for Athlete Ally, was a mentor athlete for US Paralympics and the Hartford, and was recently named to the board of directors for the National Wheelchair Basketball Association. Within the NWBA, she is the chair of the Coach Education Committee and is a member of the Women's Growth and Diversity Committee. Stephanie is also currently a doctoral candidate at the University of Illinois in cultural kinesiology, studying sport at the intersection of disability, gender, and sexuality. Phew. Please take it away, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you all tonight to discuss our experiences with intersecting marginalized identities. As was mentioned, I'm Stephanie Wheeler and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm coming to you all tonight from my home office gym. Behind me, I have a pull-up bar and some multicolored exercise bands. I am a white woman with shoulder length-ish brown hair, glasses, and I have on a blue and white striped shirt. And I am also a wheelchair user. So what I'm gonna do first is just kind of give some context for the panel. And then we're gonna get to meet our really amazing panelists. So 7 years ago, I had my first student athlete come out to me. It was a conversation that I was so grateful that this particular student athlete trusted me enough at the time to share such an important piece of themselves with me. It actually took me back to 5 years prior when I came out to my own college coach. I'd already graduated and left the program, but fortunately remained very close with my coach and felt compelled to tell him. The nausea and the smallness I felt in the build up to the conversation was a result of not only the internalized homophobia that I'd learned, but also worked in tandem with the internalized ableism that shaped how I saw myself as a disabled woman. Both were acting on me in ways that caused shame for who I was and fear I wouldn't be fully loved by someone who has been a super important figure in my life. Fortunately for me, my coming out story with my coach was positive and loving. His small micro affirmation of acceptance lifted some of the shame that I carried with me. I felt lighter, and it helped me in my journey to feeling pride in my own identity. I hope that the affirming space that I try to create within my teams has done the same for the handful of athletes who have trusted me enough to share that part of themselves with me, like the athlete I mentioned earlier. I too hope they feel lighter and a sense of pride knowing they belong because of each of the identities they bring with them to our team. This is why this conversation tonight is so important. As athletes with intersecting marginalized identities, we often carry so much more with us than just the results of a game, a meet, or practice. There's so many spaces in this world where we are told that we don't belong because we're disabled or because of our sexual orientation or our gender identity or any other identity we could potentially bring with us. Sport shouldn't be one of those spaces. There's an expansiveness to who we all are as human beings. And so with this conversation, we want to broaden the narrative of inclusion within ourselves as a disability community so that we can begin to erase stigma around disability and around sexuality. This conversation has to start somewhere, and we're so excited and grateful to be a part of shifting that narrative tonight and having that conversation. So with that, I would love to have our impressive lineup introduce themselves. Just as a reminder to first, please share with our listeners your visual description, your background description, your pronouns, and then briefly share something about yourselves. So we're gonna kick it off with my fellow baller, Courtney Ryan.
Oh, great introduction, Steph. And it's hard to combat and kind of make myself look good after that introduction they gave you with all the accomplishments you've done. So kudos to you. Basically, everybody just needs to know you're a legend. But my name is Ryan. Right now, I am currently in my office. That is yellow backgrounds, and I'm wearing a long sleeve t-shirt that says Team USA across it, Nike zip up. My pronouns are she and her, and I identify myself as a disabled adaptive athlete and a lesbian. I've been playing wheelchair basketball for about 10 years now, and I currently and most recently just made the Paralympic team to attend Tokyo. So I'll be leaving in about less than a month now, and really excited for this experience and really excited to be a part of this incredible panel. You know, like Steph said, I think it is important to have these conversations about these marginalized identities, and not just within disability community, but also within the LGBTQ plus community. So thank you, Angel City, for allowing us the stage to have these conversations and to promote these conversations.
Awesome. Thanks, Court. And we can't wait to watch you play in Tokyo in not too long. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, exciting.
All right. Next, Eric, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone, for this invitation. I'm probably the only non-Paralympian athlete on this panel, but I'm an athlete in general, former marathon runner, competing and also being a former United States Marine. I think for now, my extracurricular activities mostly are doing my 3-track skiing. I am right above the knee amputee. I am also not just a U.S. Marine veteran. I'm also Native American, Latino, disabled, and a gay person. So those are my identities, and I hope to bring some, talk to the panel on what it was like when I had to serve under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and now I am proud to be part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion committee with Move United, and I see one of my committee members in here, Dr. Andrea Woodson-Smith. So I'm also happy that she's here, and so I'm just happy that I'm still alive, considering that I could have lost my life in war in Iraq, and I'm still happy that I have my sit cycle. I still swim. I'm still as active as ever, and I love that I still get to do those able things that I used to do before.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Look forward to hearing more from you a bit later. Now we're going to have Hope Llewellyn introduce herself.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to this very important day. My name's Hope Llewellyn. I'm white and half Mexican. I have a shaved head, and I do go by she and her, but I'll answer to he and him. And with the shaved head, I do get stirred quite often, so it doesn't bother me. I'll answer to it. I'm coming to you from Palos Park, Illinois. I have a Chicago Bears jersey on, Walter Payton.
Ooh.
My background, I knew who did ooh. I have my background's of a beautiful night sky, starry sky with a little tree showing. And I am a 4-time Paralympic athlete in 2 different sports, wheelchair tennis, sitting volleyball. I've also represented USA basketball internationally and US para shooting. I was, before I was hurt, I was a fast pitch softball player, and I was also a junior Olympian in that. And what else can I say? That's the highlights, I guess.
Thanks, Hope. I think you'll have more time later to tell us more about all the amazing things you've done in sport. And little known fact, Hope and I were teammates on my very first US national team. So we got to play together for a couple of years on the national team. So it's awesome to reconnect and be able to be in space with you again. So thanks for being here, Hope. And
Thanks.
last, and I think who we heard laughing about the Chicago Bears jersey, Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Hey, guys. My name is Tom Miazga. I'm coming to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a little bit up the road from Hope, and diehard Packer fan, so I had to chuckle at that Bears jersey a little bit. So Hope, I love you. Don't worry. No disrespect to you, but those Bears are gross. Anyway, I am coming to you from my home here in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. I'm about 20 minutes north of Milwaukee, to be more specific. I use the pronouns he, him. Wearing a white t-shirt right now. It says Whitefish Bay Swimming on it as I'm coming home from a long day of coaching at the pool. I am a full-time swim coach and CrossFit coach right now, which has been great. I'm a former elementary and middle school teacher. I taught 6th grade math for a few years before moving to the pool full-time. I myself am a former Paralympic swimmer. I started swimming when I was way back in 2nd grade and swam for about 15 years, all the way through a couple of years in college. And then ended up actually leaving a university for a year to train for the hopes of requalifying after having qualified for 2008. I swam in Beijing. It was an incredible experience being a part of Team USA and everything that was offered over there. Unfortunately, fell a little bit short for London, and then it caused a big life change, which honestly has been pretty terrific. So, and at the time, it seemed more like a large adversity and huge failure, but has turned into one of the most life-altering positive moments of my life. Hung up the Speedo officially in 2015. And since then, I've actually found that I still had to be competitive some way, had to stay fit, and I actually found a local CrossFit gym, which has now turned into a blossomed new career for me. I am a full-time CrossFit coach along with coaching swimming, as I said, and I'm a part of the Wheelwatt organization, which is basically your it's synonymous with Paralympic organizations. It's adaptive CrossFit from seated athletes like myself. I was born with cerebral palsy. I use a wheelchair most of the time to get around, although I am ambulatory and can use my hips, can walk around. And we're looking at same thing as like individuals who are missing an arm, missing a leg. There's short stature, visual impairments, neurodivisions. So Wheelwatt encompasses everything you could ask for. So I felt very at home when I found this, because it felt a lot like swimming. I was competing against people of a like disability and of the same nature. And so I'm very fortunate now to call myself the 3-time and current fittest seated man on earth, having won the CrossFit Games the last 3 years and hoping to defend that title again in November, going for number 4. I officially came out as gay about 2.5 years ago now. It was an internal struggle since about 8th grade when I was 13, and came out when I was 27. Gosh, so it was a long time of battling some internal issues and some doubts and self-esteem issues. And I think the way Steph introduced herself and her story was very relatable. And I'm so excited to be here with this conversation alone, because I think a lot of the reason I never really came out was because I didn't really have anybody who was like me. I'm in a 12,000 person city, and I was the only person in a wheelchair growing up throughout high school, through middle school. So I already separated myself in so many ways. And when I had this extra layer that I wasn't even comfortable with myself, it was just hard to imagine that I would fit in anywhere. So the fact that we can be here tonight, sharing our experiences together, is great for us. I'm selfishly great for me. It's great for everybody that we can finally be here together and find some commonality. So I'm looking forward to it, and it's going to be a great night.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And thank you all for being here tonight, taking time out of your busy schedules to help our community, help the entire community, help the LGBTQ plus community to better understand this topic at the intersection of disability and sexuality. So before we jump into our questions, I think Josh might pop back in with our poll results. Yes, thanks, Josh. So just trying to get to know who we have here on the call with us. It seems like we've got a good portion. Actually, we have a balance of folks who are brand new to adaptive sport and folks who have 8+ years of experience of adaptive sport. So we're kind of at the extremes there with who we have, which is great. I think this will be an amazing introduction to just, again, the expansiveness of who we are as a disability community. And then our second question, how do you identify within adaptive sport? We have over half of folks on the call are athletes. And then the rest actually are supporters without a disability. So welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. So we are going to get started, and we really want this to be a conversation amongst the panelists. So, when we put a question out there, I would love it if anyone who feels most comfortable with the question, go ahead and jump in and get the conversation going. Once that person's done talking, someone else wants to chime in based off of what they said, that'd be great too. So we want this to be a conversation amongst everyone. So feel free to jump in whenever y'all like it, whenever you feel comfortable. So I love that everyone introduced themselves with their identities, and obviously it's a big important part of our panel tonight. And so our first question is going to be, what does intersecting marginalized identities mean to you? That's the name of the panel. And do you feel that one of your identities overshadows how people see you?
This is Courtney. So for me, intersecting marginalized identities and what it means is kind of these structural inequalities that cause kind of both physical and structural barriers. And I think examples of that could be reduced opportunities for education and income for people with disabilities or LGBTQ plus community. And I know from experience before my injury, I was a collegiate soccer player, and I had so many schools and scholarships and options to participate at the collegiate level, and so many scholarship opportunities. And you look at adaptive athletics, and while it is growing and while it's getting a lot more recognition, it's still limited within the numbers. And I think Steph, what is there, like 6 or 8 collegiate women's wheelchair basketball coaches throughout the US? Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's 6 programs now, actually. Yeah.
6 programs now. So very obviously much smaller than able-bodied sports. And I think too, with that being said, I noticed when I got into adaptive athletics and started getting recruited at the University of Arizona, I recognized that athletic scholarships were very limited, and that majority of the time, most schools are not able to provide full rides and full scholarships for adaptive athletes. Majority of the time it's, we'll give you partial scholarship, financial support, and then we can also get you enrolled in vocational rehab and different resources like that. So there's just limited options to participate in adaptive athletics and limited financial funding in order to participate. And as far as your second question to follow up, do you feel that one identity overshadows how people see you? So as I stated in my intro, I identify as a person with a disability, a lesbian, a woman, but I would definitely say that my disability overshadows me identifying as a lesbian, because I think you can visually see my disability on a daily basis. And sometimes, unless I'm wearing my rainbows loud and proud, it's a little bit hard for people to identify my sexual orientation. And I think too, sometimes there's those societal stereotypes that overshadow my sexual orientation, specifically with disability. Those societal stereotypes of a person with a disability doesn't date. And I've had experiences where, I don't know if any of you had, but I'll be walking down the street with an able-bodied friend, and they'll be like, oh, you're talking to my friend, you're a great caregiver, you're a good caregiver, like that's really inspiring that you're here taking care of her. So like there's just these stereotypes that come with living with a disability that kind of overshadows my identity as a lesbian and just kind of the dating world.
I'll jump in next time. Tom speaking here. Courtney, I think again, this is why this conversation is so awesome, because I don't think I've had anybody that I can relate to in the same way in such a unique situation. And you know, when I was getting into my swimming career, it really started to bud for me in high school. When I qualified for Beijing, I was going into my senior year. So it was my junior to senior year summer of high school. So I was beginning to think about college and getting to look at schools and start to apply. And for me at that time, especially, although I knew I was gay, I hadn't any remotely even come close to coming out to anybody. It wasn't something that was just really wasn't a huge part of my life at that time, because I was so committed to swimming. I was so committed to what I was trying to achieve that it kind of overshadowed everything in my mind as well. And I think as I grew up through high school, I think that's why people saw me as the swimmer. I was a swimmer, and especially a swimmer with a disability. And as I tried to go to college, it was the same thing. It was, for me, there was not a lot of opportunity for disabled athletes to compete on a D1 team or to even think about trying to walk onto a team. I had my dream schools in line. I had these schools that I really wanted to attend, and was very fortunate enough to get into those dream schools and went, toured the schools. And the most nerve-wracking part was always going to talk to the swim coaches and just giving my story and giving my opportunities and just saying, like, what can I do? What can I be offered? And everybody that I went to was offering me, you know, oh yeah, we have a local club team you could swim with instead. Oh yeah, you know, there's this rec program that the community center runs down the road that you could always be a part of. And it was gut wrenching, because I don't think they realized that I was swimming, you know, 12, 13 times a week. I was spending 4 hours in the gym on a week separately. I was taking care of my body, and it was a full-time job while being a high school student, and I was committed. You know, I was very fortunate to end up finding a D1 school who let me walk on. And it was one of those things where I saw the opportunity and I couldn't pass it up. As I think about it now, as I transition into the CrossFit world, what Courtney is saying and being the difference between being a disabled athlete or being gay, the athlete side of me is still something that I think still is prevalent. I'm fortunate enough that where I live, like, the community is very close knit, and that I have tremendous support. And even after I came out, I didn't really feel like much change, which was, you know, a blessing, but also a little, you know, it raised some questions of, like, you know, what am I really looking for then? And what am I trying to find out of this? Have I found all the comfort I need to be okay with myself? But the idea of being stereotyped in many different ways is too prevalent. I just recently, this past weekend, I was watching the Bucks game on Saturday night, and it was so exciting that I felt the urge to stand up. I was holding onto a table, but I was standing up where I was, and it was almost like 8-10 minutes, and not like right after the game ended, a guy came over and was like, I just have to applaud you, like, how cool it was that, like, you just stood up the whole last 10 minutes of that game and stuff. And I'm like, you know, he doesn't know me, and I get that, and I see from my perception, like, everybody can see my disability, and they have no idea what CP is like and how it affects me. But I could, you know, if I had to, I could walk up Kilimanjaro, you know, if that duty called, I would make it happen. So when people see that, it's interesting, because they don't understand the person. They just think that they have to be sincere and they have to be, you know, helpful in some way, or feel that you're an inspiration at all times. And that's really not, I think, what any of us are trying to do. We're trying to live our lives and be who we are, and feel accepted the way we are, whether it's with sexuality or a disability. So yeah, I just wanted to say that I really resonate with what Courtney was saying.
We probably all get that comment of, like, inspiration is very prevalent
Oh yeah,
in the disabled community. So I feel you there.
I have to say, and Eric might agree with me, is having a disability like ours, being an amputee, it's different, because we can be, you know, have long pants on, walking around. They might notice a little something's different, but they're not going to really think you're disabled. And I'm not sure where I was going with this, but then sometimes, like, for me, if I'm having a tough day with my leg, I'll be in my chair. And if somebody has seen me first walking around and then I use my chair, they're like, oh my God, what happened? You know, and it's just like, no, nothing's wrong. You know, it's an odd it's an odd place to be as far as like talking about intersecting, because I feel very able sometimes and other times not so much, but other people don't get that, and as far as talking about able-bodied people and how they talk to us sometimes with the inspiration and all that, I mean, I'm probably one of the oldest one on the panel, and I used to get very frustrated with the inspiration and, oh, you're out of the house and all that stuff. And I got myself around that by saying they don't mean anything bad by it. We all know that.
Right.
Just
Right.
they're trying, and and if you kind of put yourself in a place of meeting someone that you don't know well, something in their situation, it's hard. You want to say something nice, and maybe you don't know how to say it, and we're all in that boat. And also coming from, I was able-bodied for 22 years, and I would think about like, yeah, I could see me saying something dumb like that when I was able-bodied, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So I really try to give them a break and try to soften what they're saying and kind of talk in a way that maybe they'll understand what they said is a little off maybe, and just try to help them with it.
Yeah.
And as far as identifying, it's another thing. I'll agree with Tom. I feel more like an athlete. That's my first identity, I believe. And I had to really think about it when everybody was talking. I started playing softball in the 2nd grade, and I haven't stopped playing sports since. So I think in my bones, in my blood, I'm an athlete. And coming out was not that difficult for me. I've always been kind of in a man's world. I worked as an aircraft mechanic, and I was the only woman. I was one of the only women in school for that. I'm in a job now where I'm one of the only women at that job, and I just don't have a problem being out. It's just I've been lucky, I have to say. I've been very lucky. What else can I say? And then being Mexican, I don't look very Mexican, so people don't even realize I'm Mexican. When I say something about it, they're like, oh, So it's a funny, I have a lot of little intersections, and I don't feel them, if that makes sense. I guess when you live it, you just don't feel it.
I'll chime in too, Hope and Tom and Courtney. It's interesting listening to you all talk. And again, I'm so, just honored to be amongst such, athletes, especially Paralympians. I've met several after getting injured. I got injured in Iraq when I stepped on a landmine. And so before then I was a huge marathon runner. But it's interesting because I'm only 5'1". And so, of course, going into the United States Marine Corps right away, I was told, nope, you're not tall enough. And of course, I think I always knew, even when I was 5 years old or even 10 years old, I knew I was different. I knew I was gay. I just didn't know what gay was. But I wanted to play sports. I was in Little League baseball. I was in football. But then as your friends are growing up, everyone else is growing taller than you. Everyone else is filling out. Here I am, 18 years old, my senior year, and the only thing I was actually competing in was cross country. And it was interesting because it's like no other sport was really, that I wanted to do that I was capable of, because I was short. But then again, I really found my passion for running, where I joined the United States Marine Corps and the athleticism with them, being fit and everything. And I actually joined the Marine Corps thinking that it would change me. I thought joining the military would make me straight. I really thought that. And then, of course, when I got in the Marine Corps, seeing all these fit people, I was like, oh, great, this backfired. And so, because they're all good looking, especially the Marines, not to be biased. I mean, because my husband is Army, but I really oh, what did I get myself into? But even on my deployments, even to Japan, Friday night came and everybody would head off to the clubs, or they had these things called, in Okinawa, Japan, we had these things called Whisper Alley. So you can only imagine what Whisper Alley was about. Here's Eric running 8 miles the perimeter of the camp, and I would run my 3 miles in sub 18, my best time was like 16:10 at 25 years old or something. I was a running fool. And I think I was running all the time because I was trying to suppress my identity of being gay and really not trying to get found out because of getting thrown out of the military. And so and then of course, going off to war and then getting injured only 3 hours into Iraq. And so I have like partial, you can see my hand because the landmine tore all this open, and they were supposed to amputate my arm too, but they didn't. And so I don't have feeling in the hand. And so, and of course my index finger was the first thing that was taken off in the blast. But I miss my running. I don't run marathons anymore. I have a running leg and things like that, but it's not the same because my left leg was broken so bad. And I have 27 pieces of shrapnel in me. But I've been very fortunate because I have a sit cycle. I've done like the MS 150 from here to Corpus. I can rock climb. I love skiing. I do my 3-track. I swim. I have a pool here at home that I swim. I love that I'm still able to feel that athleticism of not competing, but I mean to be able to just enjoy life. Those things that we did even before, and before getting as you heard, as Courtney or Stephanie or when you had your injury, because I was 32 years old when I became disabled. And then, but what's interesting for me, because, and like I said, I'm on the diversity, equity, and inclusion for Move United, which is formerly Disabled Sports USA, which a lot of Paralympians come out of. And Dr. Andrea Whitson-Smith is on here too, and she's on the committee as well. And I was sharing because Disabled Sports USA was founded by Vietnam veterans when, of course, veterans were getting injured, and we've seen a lot of military men and women, get injured. And from TBIs, landmines to roadside bombs and all kinds of things. What I found was when I started going to compete or not compete, but to ski or to rock climb or to race, and especially the sit cycles. And I'm amongst all these other veterans, and people are talking about what branch of service you were in, who they're married to, how many kids you have, where are you from. And then as people, I don't think it's that we're intrusive, but we're conversational and we're curious. So whenever it came to like, well, Eric, where are you from? I'm from Texas. Oh, well, what's your wife's name? Because you see the ring and people, you see like, well, and that's an ism. Well, he looks heterosexual. Eric, what's your wife's name? I don't have a wife. I have a husband, and you all met him. Oh, I thought that was your friend you brought with you as a guest to Ski Spectacular. I'm like, no, that's my husband. And it's amazing how some people's attitudes change, who don't sit at the same table at breakfast anymore with you, or now who see you coming and kind of turn the other way. Because now, instead of being the veteran disabled like them, not as just amputees, but paraplegics, quadriplegics, even, I mean, it's interesting how from being, a Marine, a veteran disabled, and now, wait a minute, he's gay. And people back up a little. I mean, it's like we accept, you for being, missing a leg too, even though yours is right and mine's left, but now you're telling me you're gay. And that's the thing that I work on with the military, especially my buddies, because it's just interesting. Like, what has changed? Well, you're gay. And it's like, I'm still the same Marine. I'm still the same, disabled person, or I'm still the same person. But it's like you try to teach or really get to understand, or people have to understand that for themselves. Like, that is your fear factor, or that is your ignorance, or whatever you want to call it. I'm still the same person. And when I do have people that oppose me, because I'm like a public speaker, and like what you were saying, Hope, when I travel and people they're like, I didn't know you were an amputee. You walk so well. And they're like, or they say, then it does change. It changes them a little, because they'll be like, as we're going upstairs, they're like, oh, Eric, we can take the elevator. You don't have to take the stairs. I'm like, I want to take the stairs. My, prosthetics are advanced now. I can walk up the stairs every other step or come down the stairs, but it's just interesting because people, they do, those who want to be compassionate and care automatically start changing their ways. They're like, oh, well, we don't have to take the stairs. There's a there's an elevator right there. I'm like, I always do stairs, even at work. But it's just interesting how you see people's reactions to your different identities. I mean, if I wasn't gay, then it's like I would still be up here, with all my other Marine buddies and everything. But now, it's like, wait a minute, you're gay? Well, your privilege just dropped a little, Eric. It's like, sorry, but life's too short, and there's other people to meet who are open-hearted, open-minded, and very, very, welcoming, and to share stories like I am with this amazing panel with Tom, Courtney, and Stephanie and Hope. And it's a blessing. And those are my gifts that I have, that have been given to me, and I appreciate that. So, okay, now for a drink of water. That was
No, thanks everyone for sharing so openly about that. I think, one thing that's like just so important to understand is, within the disability community, I think we've all had some very similar experiences. However, we've all also had very different experiences. And I think that's one of the reasons why this conversation is so important. And, Eric touched on this a little bit, and I would love to hear what everyone else's experiences are as far as, what are the barriers that prevented you from being true to yourself when you're thinking about coming out, or, understanding that about yourself? What were the barriers that prevented you from being true to yourself? Or what were the things that made the environment that you were in safe and comfortable to feel like you could bring all of yourself to that space?
I first started playing wheelchair basketball, but then I found wheelchair tennis, and I started playing wheelchair tennis. And as things progressed, and I was getting to that point where I would be good enough to get sponsorship, I kind of looked around, and there weren't many gay people, but when I would kind of talk to them and kind of feel out what the tour is like, and a lot of them said the main reason they didn't want to come out was because of sponsorship. And that was something I refused to deal with. I said, well, if somebody doesn't want to sponsor me because I'm gay, then I don't want them as my sponsor. And not only in that sense, but I mean, I was given many opportunities for other sponsorship for different, drinks and supplements that I also didn't believe in. So it wasn't, I always had to be true to myself. And whether it is because they don't like me because I'm gay, or I don't like that product, I just refused. And I wasn't sure how that was going to work, but luckily I found some great sponsors, and I literally even had one of my sponsors, because I was a little wild on the tour, had crazy shirts on sometimes, and I had one sponsor, Steph, I see, say, "Oh, if you ever change, we won't sponsor you anymore." I mean, that's how lucky and very fortunate I feel to find these great sponsors. And I do believe a lot of what helped me to be that confident in coming out was I was older. I mean, I didn't get hurt till I was 22. And I don't think I found wheelchair sports till mid to late 20s even. So that helps, you get a little older, you get a little more confident. And I know that helps. But I was always trying to also realize the more I'm out, the more I can help other people come out and see, like, this is doable. We'll make it,
Yeah, I think too, for me, like I was hesitant. I came out when I was in college before my injury, when I was playing soccer at Metro State College of Denver. And I was very hesitant, probably for a lot of reasons, and similar reasons why maybe some of others have been, but just fear and shame of what other people were going to think of me. And if my identity of being a lesbian was going to change people's perceptions of who they think I am. So I remember like vividly having a conversation with my parents, and my dad's response, who I'm sure he's watching now, was, yeah, well, we pretty much already knew. I mean, you never had a boyfriend when you were in high school, and, so we still love you. It's not a big deal at all. And I was like, well, man, you guys could have told me this a long time ago to make this transition for me a lot easier. What's going on? Come on, fill me in. I'm still learning. So very fortunate to have the support from my family. My sister also identifies as a lesbian, so that's another moment in life that I'll never forget. We were sitting in the car at the beach. It was Christmas break. We were both attending college at the time, and she handed me this letter, and I like started reading it and going over it, and then I like realized that she was coming out to me, and like I started tearing up just out of pure excitement and joy of like, oh my gosh, we have like this similarity, and like our bond as like sisters now is like that much more because of this relationship that we have with this identity. So she saw me like tearing up and thought, oh, like, oh no, like that idea of shame and fear started kind of cycling through her head, thinking like, oh great, now my sister doesn't accept me and thinks like I'm different now because of my identity as a lesbian. And I turned to her and told her, I'm a lesbian too. So like we both like locked eyes, and it was just like a very, very incredible moment. And you know, my brother as well, like my entire family was very accepting, which really helped with accepting my identity as well. And you know, that fear and shame just kind of completely went out the door. And then I sustained my injury about a year and a half after I came out of the closet. And that was like another moment for me to like, I was ashamed of my identity as a disabled person because I identified as a soccer player. I thought that was my path. I thought that was my calling. And I didn't know about adaptive athletics, and I didn't have the knowledge that I have now, and didn't know about the Paralympics and those opportunities. So that was like another transitional phase that I had to face with my family support again and friends support of accepting my identity as a disabled person, because it didn't just come like within a day. It took me probably about 2 years, and you know, my parents were incredible. My mom and sister had to like teamwork and tag team each other in, because I was like went through a rage and anger phase of trying to figure life out with a disability and using a wheelchair. And then I found out about adaptive athletics when I was living in San Diego. And again, my transition and that identity of being an athlete came back, and I learned about all these different opportunities. I learned that I can continue on with my collegiate career. I learned about the Paralympics, and you know, you look at, if I were to have conversations with little young Courtney at 4 years old, she would have said like, oh, you're going to the Olympics for soccer. So now things transitioned a little bit. I'm going for wheelchair basketball, but I'm still going to the Paralympics nonetheless. So I think my identity and just like having the support and family and really helped me, you know, be true to myself and be true to my identities.
That's awesome, Courtney. I love hearing that. This is Tom again. I resonate a lot with that. I think the biggest barrier for me of not coming out, especially after knowing for, gosh, over a decade and almost decade and a half before I, you know, accepted who I was for myself, was that fear of changing in people's minds and my perception of who I was. And like I said earlier, I grew up in a town where I was the only individual I knew that was in a wheelchair, that wasn't at a local nursing home or was actually an adolescent and out and about in the city. And so I was already kind of in a situation where, unfortunately, I had to deal with some bullying in elementary school and through middle school, and just trying to, you know, kids just didn't really know how to approach me because they just felt like I wasn't more than the wheelchair. I was that kid in the wheelchair that either got in the way or was so different that we had to ask, but we couldn't figure out how to do it politely. And so I kind of felt, I think from a beginning, from a very early age, that the wheelchair alone made me believe that I had to prove myself to other people, and that I had to kind of show them that I am more and more capable of this wheelchair than what you see. I had my last surgery. I had 4 surgeries in total. I had my last one in 3rd grade. It was just a muscle lengthening surgery. So I had to be in casts the entire summer. It was a lovely time. I actually had my surgery the day after 3rd grade got out, and I got my casts off, which were from my toes all the way up to my hips. They were connected together. I couldn't move my legs at all. I had to sit up the entire summer, even when I slept. I got those casts off the day before 4th grade started. So it was quite the summer, but also the most tumultuous beginning of 4th grade I could imagine. I mean, I spent a lot of my time out of my classroom because I was with the in-school physical therapists, working on strength, mobility, learning how to basically re-walk again with the hope that the lengthening surgery that we did would help with my gait and make things a little bit more convenient. And sure enough, they did, and it was great. But again, that just put me in a situation where I had to prove myself to a whole new level. And I think that part of me stuck with me for a very long time. And I think as I started to realize, as I was, starting to realize that, like, why do I want to be all around my guy friends all the time? Like, why do I just I feel like I want to take care of them a lot more. And I feel like I care about them and I care about how they feel. And I don't want to upset them. Like, those are those first kind of signals that, like, is this normal? Like, is this what people normally do? Like, I don't know. And I will come out and say that, like, I'm a very outgoing person. I love to be enthusiastic. I love caring about other people. And that's why I love being a coach so much day in and day out. And, just seeing other people progress, because I know I've had those opportunities from loved ones and family and friends and coaches who have given me those outlets. So it's so cool to be able to give that back. But I've always cared a lot about my guy friends. And so when I started to realize that I was gay, it was one of those things where I couldn't imagine changing who I was in front of other people because I didn't want to lose them. And so I continued to stay as a swimmer, and I did student council in high school, and I really focused on grades, and I really tried to just do as much as I could so that I could literally avoid being gay and having to confront that. And I wore myself out, honestly. And for a lot of the time, I didn't even realize it because I was just working nose to the grindstone all the time, whether it was going to swim practice and then teaching swim lessons and then going home and doing homework every night, or it was getting up early in the morning to go to swim practice or go do weights. And it was always a difficult situation. And I was fortunate enough that, like, when I was in high school on the boys' high school team, it was never an issue. There were a few boys that were actually out, which was actually kind of ironic at the time, because where I'm from, it's a little Desperate Housewife-ish. It's kind of like the secrets get out and people hear really fast, and then they get spread really even quicker. And so I don't want to, I'm not discrediting my city, but, like, even in the 90s, in the early, like, when I was born in 91, I'm 30. So even in the late 90s, early thousands, it still wasn't the most accepted thing to come out. You have some individuals who are a little bit more flamboyant and where it's a little bit more obvious, and they wear it more outward than I do myself. And so it was a little bit more accepting, because it was kind of like, yeah, we get it. We see it all the time. Nobody saw that out of me, right? And so seeing those guys on the team kind of helped me feel more comfortable with it, but comfortable enough that I could kind of, like, avoid the attention of it, right? Like, there were other people on the team that were gay that were out about it, and the attention of homosexuality was on them rather than on me. And so I hate that I think about this, that I had to avoid that part of my life for so long, because it just didn't feel like for who I was. And I was, my first international meet, I was fortunate enough to win 6 medals, and I came home and it was one of these things that was like a big spectacle, and we threw a parade in the city, and it was super embarrassing, but pretty cool. But I built this persona around who I was and what I had worked hard for and what I wanted to achieve personally. And it was cool that I actually got to be an inspiration in many ways that I'd always strived to be, right? Rather than just, oh my gosh, you got up the stairs. Like, no, I worked really hard day in and day out to earn these medals at an international level. My story kind of sucks, though. I came out actually not by choice. I had told one of my dearest friends, who is basically family to me, and we're still great. Is actually one of those nights where I think they were trying to egg me on. This was like I said, this is a couple of years ago. I came out publicly about 2 years ago. I would say this is about 4 years ago. I'm saying his name is Steve, and Steve is my former coach, and he's still my colleague now. We run our swim club together. He got me started in 2nd grade. He was ironically my 2nd grade teacher growing up, and so he embedded me into swimming right from the get-go. And I think he always knew, and I never really knew that he knew, but I think he knew. And we got to a point one evening where him and his wife and I were out together just having dinner. And they were kind of joking around with the idea that, like, oh, there's a girl at, on the swim lesson staff that really likes you. And and they wouldn't tell me who it was. And And they finally did after hours of just antagonizing me about this. And I'm like inside, like, not interested. The next subject, like, let's move on. That it kind of upset me, right? It was annoying. I'm like, just stop, just tell me who it is. And I kind of, when they told me the name, I kind of just like brushed it off. They're like, after all of this time, you're just gonna say no like that. And I'm like, yeah, I really am. It's like, what? Why? And it was just kind of like, okay, I'm gay, you know, and I had to just come out and say that. And that was fine. The tough part was, though, that then when I told them, I felt great. I felt awesome. I loved it. I was like, wow, this is the beginning of something new for me. But I wasn't quite ready to come out to my parents. My dad is very Catholic. He's very religious. It was one of those things where we hadn't really anybody in our family, my expanded relatives, nobody had really ever come out. There was no nothing that would stray from the norm, as they would say back in the early thousands. And so the idea of coming out to my father was always a challenge. Like, I didn't want him to be upset. I didn't want him to disown me. I was always afraid that I was going to be just looked at as like a burden in some way, when I couldn't accept that feeling, because sometimes, you know, as a disabled athlete, you can feel like a burden, you know, like things are inconvenient because everybody else is going up the stairs easily and you're waiting for the elevator, keeping everybody behind. And so I wasn't ready to come out fully yet. And it's one of those things too, where I guess I never really had relationships. I've never really gone into the dating scene because it wasn't just comfortable for me. And so, you know, even when I'm out with Steve, it's like, we got to get this guy set up with somebody. We got to find the right girl for him. And, oh, I've got this perfect cousin and she would be great for him. And, oh, you know, and all these things. And yeah, Steve's like, yeah. And, yeah. Cause he knew. And that I told him. And I think, and I don't hate him for this, and I don't fault him at all for this, because I think he was trying to defend himself and myself. But there were plenty of times where I think those questions came up to him, and when I wasn't present, and he unfortunately outed me without me knowing. And that went on for multiple years before I came out without me knowing. Some of my closest coaching colleagues, some of my friends, and to learn that, not even from him, from somebody else, that like, oh yeah, Steve had already told me, like, no big deal. And it was like, it's one of the most crushing blows, because I lost that for myself, right? And I didn't have that opportunity. And I don't think anybody, unless you're in that situation, can understand, like, every time you play the idea of coming out in your head, it's to somebody new, or it's to the same person in a different way. And to know that I needed those experiences to learn how I could be okay with myself, and that I lost those forever. Like, it was crushing. Needless to say, we went over some hurdles, Steve and I, and it's, you know, we're all good. I promise you that. But it was also a great wake up call, because one, I knew that he cared, and I knew that he was trying to defend me, and he was trying to defend the frustration he was probably feeling, because I think he started to, in a way, to feel the way I feel. I think he started to internalize, like, God, does he get this all the time? And yeah, it is one of those things where you just don't feel comfortable when people try to set you up, because, sorry, she's not what I'm looking for. And I got to a point, like, a couple of years ago, where I was starting to realize that the fear of being alone forever was being outweighed by the fact that I couldn't accept who I was. You know, it was like, if I don't make a change in my lifestyle, I'm going to be 45 and still single and never had a date in my life that I really, truly will enjoy and appreciate. And I think, like, as mentioned before, I think there's a part of me that realized that I'm only as good to those around me if I can be myself and make myself available to everyone in all capacities. And I knew there was a part of this internal happiness that I was caging myself from, because I couldn't be comfortable with who I was, and I couldn't accept who I was, all because I was afraid that the people around me that I don't really interact with on a daily basis were going to think differently of me. And so I finally came out. I made a public post on Instagram, and it was, all I could do was laugh. You know, it was one of those things where I'm like, I kept this for 15 years, and it's like, everybody loves it and it's been super supportive, but I'm like, how did I let myself believe this was this hard, you know? And how did I let myself think that I wasn't going to be okay if I came out? You know, I think the first telling sign was that when I told Steve, nothing changed, right? He gave me a hug. he said he loved me. He said, it's all good. We've got you no matter what. And those were the beginning beliefs that like, I will be okay. I will have people. I'm a little annoyed with myself that I was still unsure enough, but ready enough to tell my dad that I actually had to do it over the phone. I couldn't do it in person. I don't like that because I think it caught him so off guard when I called him that he hung up. And that was like the first time that I actually had a negative experience where it was like, oh God, what are we gonna do here? Like, do I call him back? Do I let him call me back? Like, what do I do? I had actually told my mom almost a year before. It was kind of a long time, and she, the saint she is, she held that to her chest and never told anyone. She didn't tell my dad at all, and my mom, reassured me that after I told him, and he just said on the phone, he's just kind of like, yeah, okay, sounds good. Well, we'll figure this out, and just kind of hung up. I was like, oh my God. But he went home and he walked in the door smiling, grinning ear to ear. And he goes to my mom, he's like, oh, Tom just called me. And she's like, oh yeah. And I told my mom that morning I was going to tell him. And he's like, yeah, he told me something actually pretty unbelievable. And she's like, oh, what's that? And she said it, like, yeah, he actually told me about a year ago. And he was like, you had to hold that into yourself for a whole year. Like, and it was just the sympathy that he felt towards her and the sympathy that he felt towards me. And was one of those most gratifying things where it's like, I know I'm going to be okay. And so it had a lot of trials and tribulations, and I apologize, I'm going on forever here, but it's all part of the story, right? I mean, it's one of those things where I needed that push. I needed to have this help and this guidance to come out to learn that I'm going to be okay. And to this day, saying that I'm gay is not an issue for me. It feels comfortable. It feels fine. But I'm still learning lots. I do not know enough about what I'm looking for yet. So I'm excited that I came out and that I was working. So I worked so much to avoid coming out, but I haven't gotten rid of the working too much part yet to enjoy it yet. So I got to change that around a little bit. Start going on some dates or something, but it's a work in progress, and I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy to be who I am. And I think I've been able to finally tell myself that it's a blessing that can offer a lot of hope and praise and I know we don't like always using it, but inspiration for others around us. So yeah, it's been a long road, but fun nonetheless.
I do want to say something about his story with Steve, and it goes along with our straight allies and our able-bodied allies. And something that's cool about our straight allies, and it's also difficult for us, is a lot of times our straight allies think, okay, you're gay, so what? What's the big deal? You're still you, and we love you, and they will feel like this is no big deal, which is what we want, right? They want to feel like it's no big deal. But then because they feel like it's no big deal, they might tell other people when you're not ready. Do you know what I mean? Because hey, it's not a big deal. Who cares? And I, again, same with the able-bodied stuff. I think it all comes from a good heart. And I can remember being in a crowd of people that I just didn't know or wasn't sure about maybe, and I was a little younger, and a straight ally, a good friend of mine would say, well, she's got a girlfriend or whatever. And I'd be like, oh, because they truly think like, well, who cares? It's, the truth, and I think it's lovely, actually.
Yeah. And that was one of the things for me with Steve, was like, it was hard to be mad at him because when he was telling people, like, he was genuinely excited. It wasn't that he was like shocked and like wanted to share gossip. He was like, yeah, I genuinely care. And he was so loving and caring about it that I got over that frustration relatively quickly. So
it was like that for me too, Tom, in the military. And I think for all of us, it's something, that once you, I think, identify within yourself and your own heart, it's so hard to keep in. And for me, being in the Marine Corps, and I was always in the infantry, it was always about, why are you always by yourself? Why don't you have a girlfriend? Why are you always in the barrack? Why are you always running 8 miles on a Friday night instead of getting some? Excuse me. It was always like, and then of course with my buddies and And three of them, I became after they found out I was gay, I became, three of them, I became their son's godfather.
Oh, wow.
But it was always interesting because they were like, well, Kathy has a friend that, that she works with on base that I think you two should go out on a date. It was always the pressure. And then it got to a point where I was just so frustrated that I would end up telling my buddy. And of course, base housing is like Desperate Housewives, Hysteria Lane. They go home and a Marine can't keep it in. He's like, he has to tell his wife. And as soon as he goes off to work that day, she's going next door like, guess what John told me last night? You remember that little one, the Marine Eric, the little one, everyone knows the little one. He's gay. And it's like, and then next you know, she tells her husband who's in another unit. And so I took a lot of risk. I took a lot of risk because then I had people coming to tell me they knew. They're like, we know. Or and I think for me, I was very fortunate. I never used the word lucky because I'm not lucky to be alive. I'm very blessed to be alive. Just that I was thinking when you were telling your story, one day someone's going to be so blessed to have your heart. You're such a good person. You're just your personality alone. I can't wait to be at your wedding one day. Hopefully,
Oh my
I mean,
God.
someone's gonna win
Don't make
your
me
heart.
cry right now. Stop it. Oh my God.
And so, I mean, it's I think, and that's what this panel is. Even with Stephanie and with Courtney, the stories that we all have and hope is that even when you were talking about you were born in 1991, I was in the Marine Corps in 1991, and then in Somalia in 1992, which of course was like the movie Black Hawk Down. I'm 50, so I've seen my fair share of wars or history, things like that. But when you were talking about that, I know that even 5-10 years from now, or even next year, that when athletes, especially the younger ones with disabilities who will compete in the future for the Paralympics, I think for people hearing your stories, and if you've never thought about writing a book, you should. And Courtney and Stephanie, you too. I think what it does is it opens more doors and unlocks those Pandora boxes for people to feel comfortable. I think even for parents, what I'm working on, and I'm an adjunct professor now. I teach graduate students policy and practice. My master's is in social work, and so what I work on right now is with the transgender population. Because even this year, we're only at July, 20th, and even we're only at July, and I've never in my lifetime, I'm 50, I've never seen so many even athlete transgender bills that have been authored so far this year, even coming from Texas, and that are preventing even students, young individuals who have a gift to compete, and now being told, you're not going to compete because you were not in the body that you were born into, or all these other things. And not to talk about religion and things like that. My parents were Catholic too. And I didn't tell my father at 33 years old. I didn't tell my father because I was too scared. The man was a Vietnam veteran, served in Vietnam. My grandfather, Army, World War II, Korea. And the man intimidated me. And I asked my mom to tell him because I had already met someone. And after losing my leg, I thought that too. I said, who could ever love me now? So I did find someone who loves me, and of course now I'm married. I love life. I'm so fortunate. But it's interesting because even like when you were talking about your mom, my mom was opposite. My mom was like, you can't be like this. You're gonna shame the family. I came out to her when I was 25, and it was interesting because then I even said, well, Mom, I've never even been with a woman. And she's like, well, you need to try it, Eric. Maybe you'll like it. And I'm like, okay, this isn't working. This is going nowhere with you. It was just, it was harder for her because I think as their only son, you want, and I have a twin sister and an older sister, you want that family name to continue, or you want grandchildren, which I've never had kids. But this is my life. And listening to your story, and again, Stephanie's and Hope's and Courtney's and everyone's, even when I listen to other people's personal testimonies, it's opening many doors and knocking down barriers for all those younger individuals that are coming up. And that's what I love, and I'm so thankful to be part of this panel because it's discussions. It's not just even with of course, the gift of being an athlete. It's also even people's lives, being safe, being respected. being able to marry the one you love and being able to, share your life with them without someone, which of course will always happen. I hate to sound like a pessimist, but someone who will say, I don't approve of it. I don't think that those two should be married. It's against all whatever people want to use that as far as, but it's our lives. This is the only life we have, and I'm gonna live it. I mean, and because I sound like I'm on my speaker's bureau, but it's we're only promised today. When we wake tomorrow, it's another word. I mean, tomorrow's just a word. When we wake tomorrow, it's another promised day. And I am so thankful, and your story and Courtney's and Stephanie's and Hope, all of you have just moved me so much. And but we can all relate. We can.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Not sure if Eric is frozen for everyone else.
I think he is frozen. Yeah, I think he
Okay,
got a
all
little
right.
caught up there.
All right. But I think that's exactly right. I think, again, this is one of the reasons why we're doing this panel is that, it's so, I think these stories aren't often told. And we talked about this earlier when we were preparing for this panel that, we've talked a lot about our experiences within the disability community, but we haven't really talked a lot about experiences, being LGBT, being out as athletes or out in the disability community. And so, we're getting close to the end of our time, but I would love to hear everyone just your thoughts and experiences on, just the two communities and how accepting they've been, whether you're talking about the disability community and how accepting the disability community has been of you as an out gay, lesbian person. And then on that other side, how has the LGBTQ plus community been with accepting of you as disabled?
Well, I think I was talking about that earlier, Stephanie. Can you hear me? Because I know I got cut
You're
off.
back.
Yeah, you're back. We
Sorry
got you.
about that. No, I think I was talking about that earlier as a disabled person who goes and spends quite some time now with Move United or the events that they have, even from water skiing or summer, winter, you name it, the sports that they offer for disabled veterans or individuals. The veterans actually don't look at me as having that being empathetic. We have the same, or we have a disability. We can empathize with each other. But the minute that most of them find out I'm gay, it's like, it's like, I don't know, that kind of whole stereotype of the machismos of military takes over. And then it's like, they don't want to, so even though I have a disability like them or a Purple Heart, I have a Purple Heart, I was wounded in war. But the fact that I'm gay, the disability goes out the window. It's like, well, he's not one of us. And I mean, and it's obvious. I mean, and it hurts. It's like, well, that's your bigotry or ignorance. Life's too short, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go continue to ski or scuba dive or cycle, or I'm going to do my activities and have fun.
I hate to put a huge generalization here, but I think I will. It's a lot easier for women coming out. I think overall, I mean, I've thought about this a lot lately, especially with a lot of transgender issues coming up these days. And I really feel for our brothers, our gay brothers, our trans brothers and sisters. It's the reason it kind of hit me is I realize I actually dress in drag every day of my life. I don't wear any women's clothes. The only thing I own is a bra that's a woman's clothes. You know what I mean? And I don't get it, nobody says anything, notices anything. It's just, that's how Hope dresses. But if a guy were to dress in his comfort zone, which might be a little more feminine, it's not going to be accepted. It's not going to be easy for him. And it just goes that same way all the way down the line. And I just feel for our brothers. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what else to say about that, but I wish there was something more we can do to help. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to that a little bit. I think when I think about, as I said, I'm trying to just figure a lot out about who I am and what I'm looking for. I'm not incredibly flamboyant, and I don't typically wear my sexuality on my sleeve. I'm not very outward about it. I often let my actions and my work and the personality just kind of do the talking for me. And I still would love to have a traditional dating life and traditional lifestyle about finding the man of my dreams. And I think that's often a stereotype that if you're gay, you're very feminine, that you have to be, you're dressing in very tight clothes and everything has to have glitter attached to it. Like I often feel like even when I was growing up, I think that might have been a little bit of the stereotype that I thought of when I was younger, and that like I didn't recognize that and I didn't relate to that in much. And so for me, it was that internal battle of like being okay with that I don't fit the stereotype. I know it sounds odd, but like if I'm gonna be gay, I might as well be as like gay as people would think me to be. So it was hard to try and balance that. When I think about the disabled community, I really actually unfortunately didn't come out until after I left swimming. So I haven't really seen many of my teammates in person to really talk about it, but I know when I did come out, the amount of outpour and support from them was fantastic. But when I'm at, a CrossFit competition with my wheel wad friends and, amputees, seated athletes, whoever it may be, it's no big thing. And that's kind of what I'm comfortable with. It's not a driving factor. I think when I first came out and went to my first competition, a few people had mentioned something, but again, it was easier and more convenient in real time to just like send a text or send a DM on Instagram in the moment, right? And so then by the time I actually saw them, it was no big deal. It was nothing to bat an eye at. And it was just, oh, there's Tom. Hey, how's Tom doing? And so I appreciated that. And that's I guess that was what I was always looking for when I came out, was that I wasn't going to lose the person that I was, and I wasn't going to be looked at in a negative light because of it. And, I still get to share my opportunities and love for, helping others as much as I can every day. So it's been pretty great.
Mhm. Yeah, just to like kind of piggyback off what Tom and Hope are saying, I think it is very true as far as like you look at sports and there's this idea of like masculinity, right? Like men, NFL players, men, they're just like these idealistic idealistic images of masculinity. And then, it's same for women where like, oh, like they're very in touch with their masculinity because they play sports. So you come out of the closet as a female athlete, majority of the time the response is, well, yeah, I mean, she plays sports, that makes sense. And I'm sure with you, Hope, there's that stereotype, well, yeah, she played softball, so that makes sense, right? And like with like the idea of men in these situations where they're coming out of the closet who are also, athletes, I would imagine, and this is a generalization, but I would imagine it can be harder because this idea of masculinity versus femininity, and what you were saying, Tom, like they expect, oh, you're a gay man, but where's your glitter? Where are your platforms? Why haven't I seen you at drag night? Like all these like stereotypical comments will come to you, and it can be frustrating because it's like, that goes for disability too, that, the expected idea or like image that of what disability looks like. And I've had experiences where I get dirty looks just getting out of my car before I get my chair out, because they're like, why is this young girl parking in the disabled spot? This is just. And then I love to like give them eye contact back while I'm getting my wheelchair out, and they're just like, oh, hi, do you need any help? Are you good? Like, yeah, I'm good, but I saw you.
Yeah.
So I think stereotypes, and like, this is a really great panel to have these conversations to kind of combat what a gay man should look like, what a lesbian should look like, what and those different ideas and stereotypes are really powerful to talk about. And as far as like being involved in the LGBTQ plus community, they're also part of a marginalized group and a stereotyped group. So I've always been fairly accepted, but I do struggle sometimes going to pride events that aren't wheelchair accessible and get very frustrated because they want to claim like, oh, this is for everybody, we want to be united and have these great experiences. But then like sometimes I'll look on the websites and I can't find any sort of like accommodations, or like I'll get there and yeah, sometimes there's like a platform for some for people that use wheelchairs so I can actually see the parade instead of having to like try to shovel my way and push my way through all these different costumes. And it's just, it can be very difficult. And, you know, I think that we need more collaboration within the communities of these marginalized identities. I think another thing just to touch upon quickly is like UC, which is an incredible thing and I love it. But during Pride Month, for LGBTQ+, you see so much, you know, pride. You see celebrities, you know, showcasing their support, whether they're part of the community or not, but they're showcasing their support. And what follows after Pride Month? Disability Pride Month. And you just don't see as much support from these celebrities. You don't see parades happening. You don't see celebrations happening. And that can sometimes be frustrating. And I think just to like last comment, I think we can learn a lot from the recent, and it's not recent, it's been going on for a while, but the Black Lives Matter movement. You see a lot more collaboration and you see different sayings like white silence is compliance. And you see people with privilege supporting these marginalized communities and using their voice for good to try to combat change and try to motivate this movement. And I think we need more collaboration between these marginalized groups in order for change to, you know, be universal.
Yeah, all the snaps and claps. I think this portion of the discussion has been really, I think, eye-opening and wonderful for two reasons. One, I think the redefinition of what we can all be in the gay community, in the disability community. We don't, you know, all have to look the same way. Disability doesn't look the same way. Sexual orientation all doesn't look the same way. And I think that's really important for everyone to grasp, because a lot of times we are put into these boxes and told who we can be and who we should be and who we shouldn't be. And, you know, for me, it was actually kind of the opposite. It was the femininity piece. Like, I grew up in the South and there was a very specific way that you were supposed to be a woman, and being an out gay athlete was not it. And so that actually for me made it harder to come out, because I didn't want to fit that stereotype of what that gay athlete looked like. And so, you know, I really think that's important. Coming from this panel is just, you know, we all don't fit into this tiny, neat little box. And that's what makes us, you know, beautiful in all of our humanity. I think the second piece of that, and I think what Courtney said really well, and that kind of leads into, you know, one of our last questions here is, you know, we want to create these spaces of belonging and spaces where we are collaborating and working with those who are different race and those who are other genders and sexual orientations. And, you know, we don't want to continue to stay in our silos and only work on our issues. So, you know, where does that responsibility lie in creating those spaces of belonging? Like, where does that fall, you know, in your guys' opinion, when we are trying to create spaces where we can bring all of who we are to that space?
A tough one. This is Tom talking. I think, unfortunately, it's, I think we're the ones that are in the thick of it, and we have to be the ones to voice through that, you know, that hurdle of being the educators, because really, I mean, the most authenticity is going to come from those who actually experience it, right? And so, you know, it's all, I think a lot of us felt it with our disability already. I always tell people, I always prefer you ask than assume. Like, that's always, you know, that's always a good way to look at it. And, you know, it's then taking the time to understand, like, guess what? You can be in a wheelchair and still walk. Like, it's a thing. You don't have to be paralyzed to be in a wheelchair. And, you know, I think the same thing with being accepting in other places. At the end of the day, it doesn't affect you, right? My choice of love life and the person that I want to spend my life with doesn't directly impact you when you go home, right? And if it does, I'm sorry that it does, but that's something that you'll have to internally work out. I can help educate you and make you feel as comfortable with the situation as you can. But I think it's coming from the authenticity that we provide. That's probably the only way to really help set the tone for what's available out there. And I think I will say, when I did come out, I think within the CrossFit gym and the CrossFit community, I was very supportive, and I felt like, you know, really welcomed to my new lifestyle when I was there. But I think it also did help change the culture a little bit where, some people that would, it was still a thing a couple of years ago to say like, oh my God, that's so gay, right? Like, I think when I came out, those stopped very quickly and I didn't ask anybody to, right? I think people became more aware of that. They became more aware of what they were saying and how, oh, maybe some of these things are more offensive. We saw the remove the R word movement a while back, and I think it's still a very prevalent thing that we don't use the word retard with individuals, right? And I think that's come a very long way, which has been fantastic. And as a former teacher, like I know that's, as like working with sixth graders, like that word has gone out the window in many school settings, which has been fantastic. But I think it's on us to help people understand that, again, our authenticity and who we are doesn't have to affect you. And so let's educate as best we can to help drive that force forward.
Yeah, Tom, I think that's spot on. I think too, this is coming from a coaching perspective. I think we can, have some similarities here too, like as coaches, and you sort of talked about the impact your coach had on me. My coaching just have had an impact on me as well. I think it's also on us, right? Like whether we identify with marginalized communities or not, as those with power and privilege over sport communities, right? Whether we're coaches or administrators or those who are responsible for setting the tone and creating the culture that we're in, that's on us as well. And so I think it's a combination and it's a collaboration between those two entities. But I know as a coach, I take that job very seriously. I take that responsibility very seriously, right? To make sure that anything that I do, I'm very conscious of the environment that it creates and who feels welcome and comfortable to bring all of who they are to that space. So I think that's a great point, that it's on us that are in those marginalized communities. We have to speak up and speak our truth and authenticity, but it's also on the folks who are creating those environments for us as well. So no, that was great. So we're coming to an end here. And it seems like the hour and whatever has flown by. We want to open it up for questions. We have about 7 minutes-ish to open it up for any questions.
I think Josh has a question, Stephanie.
Yes. So I think we had a couple questions that did come through. I'm going to go back to one that came in a little bit ago because I think it's really good. And this was speaking to Hope's point of, and Tom as well was saying our straight allies or our non-disabled allies saying, oh, this is Hope, she has a girlfriend, it's no big deal. Do y'all think that potentially could unintentionally discredit the personal journey that y'all have gone through?
I don't feel that way. Because again, I'll just keep going back to, I just believe their heart is in the right place. And without them understanding what kind of journey we go through, coming out and being in this world as gay or LGBTQ plus, they might have a small idea, they watch movies or whatever.
Right.
But I think it's their way of being our ally, because they're saying it's no big deal, because they're saying, what are they saying? Like, it's no big deal because you're just a human being. For them, you're just another human being. Yes, okay, so you happen to like this person instead of that person. I don't feel like they're being disrespectful. That's my feeling. And that's more, I'm speaking more along the gay side of things. And I can't say I've noticed that with disability, like somebody saying, oh, you're just this, who cares? It's no big deal. I think it's easier for someone to understand that, because you always get the people who say, well, I was in a wheelchair for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
So they have that little bit of experience, being on crutches or whatever, and so they feel like they get that more, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on there, Hope. Thank you. And I think one of the last questions we have that's come in, talking about our straight or non-disabled allies, what can they do to help us grow acceptance in each of those communities of, disabled people in the LGBTQ plus community and of LGBTQ plus folks in the disabled community? What can our straight and or non-disabled allies do?
Use your voice and continue to educate yourself about these marginalized communities so that way you can spread awareness as well. So like what Steph said, is using your privilege in a way to share those stories of these communities to be able to educate those people that are just, they just don't know or sometimes unwilling to learn. And I know from like my parents have done a great job spreading the word about adaptive athletics. I have a long list of family members that have really done a great job of like advocating for the disabled community. And I've had family members participate in flag meetings when we initially came out of the closet, we meaning my sister and I. So I think just continuing to educate yourself so that way you can pass the torch to the next generation of people, and being able to use your voice and privilege to combat those stereotypes is a huge thing and a huge support. And it doesn't sound like much but it can be, it can get frustrating because, there are going to be people that just don't want to hear it and just don't accept it, but at least you're being able to use your voice to help out these communities.
Talk about the Paralympics more. And I will never ever forget being in Australia and the crowd support, the crowds for the Paralympic Games out there were incredible. And I just was so blown away. And I asked this family who I saw at a hotel, and they were so excited to go to the Paralympic Games and watch. And I was just so blown away. I said, how they didn't know someone who was a Paralympian. They just wanted to come and watch. They were spectators. And I said, how did you guys know about the Paralympics? Because, here in the US, a lot of people don't know about the Paralympics. And they looked at me like I was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? It's the Paralympics. Of course we know about the Paralympics, and it's just, if we get more able-bodied people talking about Paralympic Games and how, how great they are. And it's a great spectator sports all over the place in Paralympic Games, and that would help. And as far as the marginalized, I don't know, but let's get them talking about the Paralympics first. How about that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to jump in here and say thank you to everyone for attending tonight. And thank you, Stephanie Wheeler, Courtney Ryan, Eric Alva, Hope Llewellyn, and Tom Miazga for sharing their experience and also giving us action items to go out and be able to make sustainable change. I'd also like to thank the Hartford, the Foundation for Global Sports Development, and the United States International Council on Disabilities for supporting tonight's powerful event. But wait, there's more. Please join us Thursday for our Team USA training and tactics session from 4 to 6 p.m., where we will feature goalball, wheelchair tennis, and para-canoe. And then we will host another panel discussion next Tuesday, where we will hear from legends from the Paralympic movement. So that's next Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you again to everyone for being here, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thanks, you
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.